hopefully you'll find it interesting. There's a lot of stuff in here that does relate to the work we do here, and I'm trying to be as transparent as possible about what the process looked like. Most of you know that I kickstarted this, which is a really interesting thing. So I'm going to share as much as I possibly can with you, and as little time as we possibly can. And I don't know that there'll be time for questions, but at the end, like if you want to ping me on Slack, if you have questions, I'm happy to talk about it. So I'm going to go through a few things, how it all led to this, like what led me to create a board game, because that's kind of a weird thing to do. What the game design looks like and how you play test a board game, how you promote and advertise a board game, how you manufacture and fulfill and ship out this stuff, and then kind of some of the learnings I've come through with this. So are you seeing the right screen? Are you seeing my presenter screen? Are you seeing my shared,
correct screen?
You're good.
Slides. Seeing the shit, yeah.
You're good, okay. It doesn't have like a green border, I couldn't tell. Okay, so how did it lead to this? Here's young Judson Cowan on the far left there. On Halloween, I used to build haunted houses for trick-or-treaters that would come in. These are my friends Landon and Brandon, and I don't know who's in the mask. It could be an actual goblin. So I found game design to be a really interesting confluence of every skill I've kind of learned in my life, and that's really fun. So there's like, illustration is obviously a big part of it because you need to make it look nice. Advertising, you have to sell the game. There's a graphic design element. You got to do the packaging and the instruction manual and stuff. There's a lot of music involved. Like I wrote a jingle for this. You got to film a trailer. You got to do the photography of the game. You got to do user research. You got to understand how the game is played. You got to do, there's UX, UI, there's systems thinking, there's fabrication, print production. And then somewhere in the middle of all this is board game design. So it was really cool how I got to use kind of almost every skill I've ever learned professionally. And I thought that was great because I know how to do everything. And the reality is there's a whole bunch of more shit you need to learn that I had no idea how to do. So, business development, customs, payment processing, working with influencers, dealing with fulfillment, community engagement. There's a lot of moving parts to the generation of a board game and sales of a board game. They say to, in literature, they say to write what you know. And theming is really important to board game designs, especially important to me. So I am really big into monsters. Like this is a plate that I drew when I was 9 years old that I still have. That featured, we call them sea heroes. They're just the various different sea life that have become heroes. And I kind of took that concept, and over life, I never really stepped away from drawing monsters. So I made a board game about building monsters. So it's like a Frankenstein type thing where you kind of piece parts together to create hideous abominations. Similarly, I am really obsessed with spooky stuff. This is me at Zombie Walk in Atlanta. There's my wife helping me paint my thighs. I call it a good one. There's again me building haunted houses in my front yard, and I also worked at in the bottom left corner there. That's Netherworld. That's a professional haunted house in Atlanta. I worked at 1 year while I was working full time in advertising. That was interesting. So I have this obsession with haunted houses. So I'm also building a haunted house game, like where you build and run a haunted house called Fright House. So it's considerably more complex, but I tried to stick to themes that I'm very familiar with. So let's talk a little bit about how you design a game. So I mentioned theming, and some people might think it's kind of putting the cart before the horse to start with theming. A lot of people will design the gameplay first and then kind of skin a theme over top of that. But I think theming is the most important part of this. And I like to start with the theme. So this is the original, this is the genesis of the Hideous Abomination game. This is a sketch in my little notepad where I just kind of put it together. And it didn't honestly change much from what you see here. I had an idea about making a Frankenstein game, which I wasn't the first. There's definitely tile laying games that are building monsters, but I tried to bring a unique angle to it. Then I went to prototype. So in a single night, I got Sharpies out, and I have these little blank square cards, and I put together this thing. And there we are playtesting it at work with some folks from engineering. And I kind of, this is an MVP type thing. It's the same principles you would use in product design or in marketing design, where you want to fail fast. You want to do it as simple and as quickly as you possibly can to learn what you can and make sure that it's going to be a fun game and you're not wasting time in building it out. So once you have a tried and tested MVP, then you have to start balancing things out for real. So things need to work effectively. There's a lot more spreadsheets involved in board game design than you might imagine. Here is the actual balancing for the tiles for the game. This is only kind of a quarter of them. They kind of run off the page here, but there's different colors, and the game needs to be fair for everyone. There needs to be no broken systems in the game that allow people to have a stronger advantage over one another. It needs to feel like everyone has a fair shake at coming out of it. So this is kind of what that looks like, making sure things are balanced throughout. And then there's There's a lot of elements to board game design you wouldn't think about. And I mentioned systems thinking earlier. So in the same way that like our product, if you make one change, it has repercussions throughout other areas of the product. You need to be aware of how downstream conversion is affected and so on. Same thing here. Like there's things like it needs to fit on a table. So this is a 6x4 table. It's kind of a standard size I started with for Fright House. I need to make sure that everything's going to fit effectively on the table and you've got room for people's drinks and their snacks and stuff like that. So like if I add a gameplay mechanic, is it going to make it too big? Like, you know, is that going to create elements that push it off the table? Is that additional cards going to make the box need to be bigger to encompass them? Is that going to push our shipping costs up? So everything has kind of repercussions throughout. It's really interesting. Illustration obviously is a big part of this also. I like hand-drawn stuff, so I did all this with pen and pencil, and then I scanned it in and colored it on iPad Pro, which was really fun. What you're seeing on the left there never came to fruition. It wound up absolutely illegible, but that was original pass at the logo. Here's the instruction manual. So I like jigging all of this information together was an interesting design challenge. So there's an early sketch, and then here's how I kind of mocked it up on the computer, and then I took that and drew all those elements and put them back together. And here's kind of what the finished version of the instruction manual looks like. And then fabrication was a big part of this. Got to work with my hands, which I really enjoy. So I needed to make a prototype, so I had something to film. So I, built a box, stuck the artwork to it, had printed.com, print out all this stuff. Had some dice fabricated at a place in Spain. And I corner punched every single one of these cards. Corner punches are awesome, but I must have corner punched thousands of corners, which will really make your thumbs hurt over time. But it helps prevent damage to the corners. And at the end, you have this beautiful prototype, which is really cool. So that had something to photograph for advertising, had something to film for the Kickstarter video, and that was nice. And then that goes into playtesting. So it's been balanced, it's been produced. You have a better idea of what it's going to feel like to play the actual game. And there's kind of two types of playtesting. So there's normal, where I sit down and I teach people to play the game and we play it and I see how it feels. And then there's blind, where I hand it to someone and expect them to read the rules, understand how to play it, and play it effectively. And I could see in doing that whether the rules covered everything they needed to, whether people understood the concepts, and whether it would be, when they took this thing home with them, something they could pick up and play on their own. So here's the design studio in Edinburgh and people playing it. The top left picture there is the train down to Beyond 2020. We were playing on the train, and on the upper left there, that's an ottoman at a Airbnb in Sicily. So it fits onto various different table sizes. And I don't remember who it's often accredited to Keats, but I don't think it's Keats, has Murder Your Darlings. There's a lot of that in board game design. So this is like the don't hate the player, hate the game, or so don't hate the game, hate the player. Oh, no, I had it right. Don't hate the game, hate the player, hate the game. People will ultimately not understand the simplest of things. This is user research, basically. You're doing usability testing on this kind of stuff. So they're ultimately not going to understand some stuff that you think is very, very clear. And ultimately, you kind of have to accept that it's your fault and fix it and move on. So hate the game. Learn to just let things go that you're pretty proud of. Here's an entire color set that I just got rid of. So these tiles don't exist anymore. And there was still some, I really like that head on the upper left there. Entire game mechanics and elements killed off. Fright House has had like several systems just removed entirely. So once you've got a game built, you have to figure out how to advertise and promote it. So most people know that I did Kickstarter, which is a really effective way to build an audience. And it's just as terrifying as you might imagine. So you get to watch over the course of a month, this thing kind of trickle along and wonder whether or not it's going to succeed, which is a really terrifying thing. And there's a real, like, if people know what the Tetris effect is, where you like start to dream about a thing, where you're seeing Tetris tiles falling down, that definitely happens with Kickstarter. I checked it constantly. I dream about refreshing the Kickstarter page and watching those numbers incrementally tick up, invade your thoughts and dreams. Here's what that looked like. Over the course of 30 days, I was trying to reach 30,000 pounds, and that number includes shipping costs. So you can see the first day there was a big spike, and then things kind of tabled off, and then I turned on advertising on the 6th, and you can see there's a big spike there as well, and then again things tabled off. And then on the last day there was just this massive spike. I think we did over 7K on the last day, which was insane. I did not expect things to succeed. I had already on the morning of July 30th written the email, hey, sorry we didn't make it, here's next steps. And I wound up having to rewrite that email, which was really exciting. We just made it just over the line at like 30,667, I think. So I used Kickstarter to fund it, but in order to do that, I needed like a commercial, basically. So a video that would run on the front end. And I was aiming to replicate I don't know if you had these in the countries you grew up in, but we had like these 90s gross out style ads like Mad Balls and Creepy Crawlers and Dr. Horrible's Laboratory and stuff like that. They all had really goofy jingles. So I wrote a jingle, I storyboarded it, created a shot list out of that storyboard, filmed it in 2 days in lockdown with only my wife to assist. I even borrowed a fog machine from Matt Haley, who's one of the engineering tri-blades, if you know him. And I transformed, this is my kitchen. I transformed it into a mad scientist laboratory, which I think was pretty effective. And this was mostly done with just stuff I already had in the house. Although I did draw some background props, some like little medical charts for monster assemblage. And then we filmed over 2 days. There's me as a 40-year-old, 8-year-old kid. There's my wife as a stodgy, teacher type. And then here is the end result. Most people have probably seen it. We'll just watch it again really quickly. Oh wait, I'm not getting audio. Can you hear that?
In Hideous Abomination, you compete against your friends to create weird creatures. Gross! Each player constructs their own gruesome creation from over 100 creepy body parts. Match your color scheme for even more points. It's got noses for ears, and it knows all your fears. It's a hideous abomination. With randomized trophies and awards, no two games are ever the same. I've got 8 digits.
I've got 13.
Beware when making monsters lest you become one yourself. Sabotage your opponents, or steal the best tiles and use them for your own devious ends.
It's horrible. No, it's hideous.
It's got razor-sharp claws, evil flesh-eating jaws, eerie eyeballs and wings. It's a terrible thing. It keeps growing and bending. Tell me where will it end? It's a hideous abomination. Hideous Abomination comes with everything you see here. This product is still in development and subject to change. Back now on Kickstarter. Sorry, no CODs.
Let's see if I can skip that slide now. Yeah, so that's the commercial I came up with. And there was also some paid advertising that went along with that. So I ran Facebook ads, Twitter ads, and I ran display ads on BoardGameGeek.com, plus I sponsored a podcast. I set an advertising budget for £1,000. So that was like what I was willing to put in. That was the only upfront costs, and I wound up doubling it, or almost doubling it. So for transparency, here is exactly what I paid to run these ads. So for Board Game Geek, which know the value of their site, it is the premier destination for board gamers. I put most of the advertising budget went directly to that, and it was a decent return on investment. I think I probably got twice as much backers out of that, or backing dollars out of that as I put in. Facebook did a decent amount. Twitter wound up not being a really effective platform, and I turned that off. And then I sponsored this Mega 64 podcast where they just like gave a shout out on it, but that wound up being too much friction. There wasn't like a card on the video on YouTube. People couldn't click through easily. They had to go to they had to either search for the game or go to the link in the description. And I don't think I got an ROI on that. Here is just one of the dashboards. So this is the Facebook performance dashboard. You can see how the budget was applied across these different, so I had like different ones for final week, different ones for launch. The launch video, like click-through rate of 1.63%, not terrible. Cost per click of 11 pence, which isn't terrible. Some of these performed pretty well. My pre-launch stuff did not perform well because it was just directing to a like static landing page that didn't have anything on it. People were bouncing, so it wasn't performing very well. I also did some stuff with influencers and bloggers. So I did a few live streams where we played the game live and people could tune in. Not many people did. I had a Polish game blogger that was one of my backers do a little review of the game. I did this live stream with Tabletopia, which is an online platform I put my game on. But ultimately, this is where I dropped the ball the most. I feel like I should have, I'll go into this in the learnings, but doing a lot more upfront with influencers and bloggers would have helped to drive more conversions. Yep, so I made a digital version of this, and you can play it for free on Tabletopia right now. Anybody can go play it, and that helped drive a bit of traffic as well. I'm also going to put it onto another online thing called Tabletop Simulator, so you can play it there as well. I did some community engagements, and there's like a how to play video, which you can see here. I did a print and play version, so there's a whole community of board gamers that just like to print out and play their own stuff. Like they enjoy the building of the games just as much as the playing of them, which is really cool. And I've gotten to know that community a bit by like joining some Facebook groups with them and understand what kind of stuff they're looking for. I did some social engagement on my social profiles for my board game company. And then here's where we are now. So now that it's been successfully funded, I need to figure out how to make this thing, which I'm pretty far along with now. So before, I told you I was gonna be transparent. Here's like some really, really transparent budget stuff. Before I even set up the Kickstarter campaign, I needed to understand exactly how much it was gonna cost to make this thing. And I need to understand how much it was gonna cost to ship it. And you have to do all that before you can launch. It needs to be rock solid understanding so you don't make yourself broke, basically. So I got an idea of what my cost per unit was gonna be by pulling estimates from vendors and stuff like that. And I pulled, they said always pull at least 3. I think I pulled 4 and wound up going with this one, which is a company called Gainland. I won't go too much into this because it's kind of boring, but a few key acronyms that I learned. MOQ is minimum order quantity. It's important to be aware of because if you only sell 1,000 units and they have a minimum order quantity of 2,000 units, you're going to cost a lot of money, and it's going to be stuff you have to store somewhere because that's a lot of space 1,000 board games can take up. CPU is cost per unit, so that's what you're trying to get as low as possible. So for example, the cost per unit for my finished board game is somewhere around £5. Whereas producing a single prototype cost about 200. So there's economies of scale to be had there. And then DDU, this is one I had never heard before, and I can't even actually remember it. It's delivery duties unpaid. So this is the freight cost. This is how much it costs to get the board games from the manufacturer to where you're going to ship them out from. So not to the individuals that are going to receive them, but to me or to the fulfillment center. Yeah, so while we're talking about shipping, it's an absolute nightmare. And the fun part is you don't know if you got it right until months later. I still don't know if I've got this right. So like you can pull estimates, you can estimate the weight of the item and how big it's going to be, but that might change based on, if there's issues in manufacturing and stuff. And like ultimately, seriously, shipping is just an absolute nightmare. Like working with a platform like Kickstarter means suddenly your audience is the entire world and you need to meet the shipping needs of the entire world. And shipping to the entire world is not easy. So understanding the cost to all the different places is probably just as complex as everything else I did put together. If I could ignore one part of this, I would, if I had a recommendation for Kickstarter, do something that doesn't require shipping. Do a digital product or something like that that doesn't require you to deal with shipping because it's terrible. So to help with that, I'm using a fulfillment center in the US. So they're going to handle everything except for EU. So I will ship out everything in the EU, which is only about 100-ish units. So most of it in the UK and some on the continent. And then everything else will be handled by a shipment company in the US. These really fine fellows here, I'm sure they're just as happy as that when they're packing the boxes. And literally all they do is I give them the orders and they match the SKUs up and put it in the box and ship it off to the address that's required. So they charge you per item they put in the box, which is called pick and pack. So yeah, 85% of the sales were in the US. This is where I am right now. I had to figure out how to make barcodes. Like you have to register a business and generate barcodes. This is my actual barcode, which is really cool. So even if it's not being sold in shops, like the fulfillment center needs a barcode to scan to ensure they are shipping the correct thing to the correct people. So you have to generate barcodes. And if you have 1 to 10 barcodes, it's like 250 pounds or dollars, it's US dollars. And if you have 10 to 100, it's $750. And I had something like 13. So I'm going to, because each of your t-shirt sizes needs to be an individual barcode. So I have 3 t-shirt sizes that I'm going to ship out myself to not have to pay the additional $500. So here's the real fun, transparent part. You know that I made at least 30K on Kickstarter. How much of that money do I get to keep? So here was the actual funding number. We funded at £30,669. Kickstarter right off the top takes a fee out of that. So they take a 3% of the total sales, I think, plus the credit card processing fees for it, because they have to charge all of the people that back the game. So $2,890 came out from Kickstarter. You know that I put $2,000-ish in for advertising up front. There's some other costs that I didn't include, but they're smallish, like printing prototypes and stuff like that. I did use a tool called BackerKit afterwards to allow people to add things on so they could buy expansions or additional copies of the game or t-shirts or stuff like that. And I wound up making about, minus their fees, $3,863 from BackerKit, so that pushes the number back up. The manufacturing is going to cost about $8,500. That's for the game, the expansion, a playmat, all the t-shirts, stickers, patches. I think that's everything. The freight cost to ship all of that stuff to me and to the fulfillment center is about 1,400 pounds. And then shipping, who knows? I'm estimating somewhere between 8,000 and 10,000-ish pounds, or 7,000 and 10,000 pounds. So let's say 8,000. So at the end of the day, the total that I take home pre-tax is about 1,200 pounds, or 12,000 pounds, sorry. which is, it's not anything to sneeze at, but it's probably, if I was paying myself freelance rates for the amount of time I put in, it's not a terrible pay, it's not amazing. It could and I have some ideas about how I could make that number better in the future. So we're gonna talk about that, what I've learned. So the one thing I mentioned this earlier is to build your audience up front. So like trying to gather the people you need to hit a funding goal while you're trying to run a campaign is like chasing your tail. It's really, really difficult. I got there, but only just. And there was a few times I didn't think I was gonna get there. And I knew this going in. Like, you know, all the advice is to do this up front. And the way to do it is to reach out to bloggers, to send, like to produce prototypes and send them to them. And let them review and get the audience excited about this, go to conventions and let people play test the game and stuff like that. But I kind of thought, you know, I have a following in the video game industry because I do music and fan art. And I thought that some of that audience would transfer, but it didn't really. There wasn't as much of an overlap between board games and video games as I had imagined. So I got there, but only just. So that kind of learned this next learning word is you need to spend money to make money. So, you know, advertising was pivotal to the success of this campaign, but I should have created those prototypes. I should have put the money in to build 4 or 5 of these things, which would have cost me, you know, a little bit over $1,000, and send that to influencers to generate a buzz. And that would have meant, instead of making just 100% of funding, we got 1,000% of funding. Most board games will fund within 3 minutes because they've built the audience ahead of time. And then they wind up smashing their goal by 10 times or 20 times. So hopefully next time, 20 times funding, that'd be great. You gotta be okay with failure. Like this, I knew going in, like I was prepared to fail because I knew I didn't maybe have the audience, but I thought it would be a good learning experience regardless. Whether I succeeded or not, I'd take an audience away from this. Like even if I didn't wind up funding, I get to bring those people that had decided to fund with me. Like I can build a mailing list out of that. And I already had some next steps planned. Like I was going to invest in prototypes and such. But like the last learning is to never give up hope. And I almost did a couple of times in the middle. I thought about pulling the campaign because of that tabled activity in the middle of the like 30-day window where it didn't look like I could possibly get to funding. I didn't expect this exponential spike on the last day. And I don't know, like there was a lot of stuff that led to that. And like I told you, I drafted that email in the morning of the last day that we didn't make it. And then this miraculous thing happened and we did make it. And that was really cool. So never give up hope. And that's my run through of Kickstarter. There's me playing Fright House, playtesting Fright House, my next game with Holtzman, my dog. Thanks.
Amazing.